About 2.5 million years ago, Homo habilis appeared in East Africa. It was one of the first representatives of the genus Homo. It differed from the more primitive Australopithecines by its increased brain volume and the initial use of stone tools. It is believed that this species marks the beginning of the evolutionary line that led to modern humans. Stay tuned to the end, and you will learn why it is considered the first human, how it lived, and which other species coexisted alongside it. Homo habilis existed in Africa from about 2.5 to roughly 1,400,000 years ago. Its remains have been found primarily in East Africa, in the Olduvai Gorge, Tanzania, near Lake Turkana, Kenya, and also in South Africa. It is one of the few species of the genus Homo whose distribution never extended beyond the African continent. It never migrated to other regions. At the time of its existence, Africa's climate was undergoing significant changes. Previously dominant forests were shrinking, giving way to dry savannas. This environmental shift forced hominids to seek new survival strategies. Homo habilis was among those who managed to adapt to the new conditions. It was no longer dependent on trees and moved on two legs across open spaces. This gave it an advantage: a broader view of the surroundings, energy efficiency, and the ability to carry objects. No evidence of fire use has been found. They did not build shelters and most likely slept on the ground or in natural refuges, such as rock crevices and abandoned animal dens. The environment posed serious threats. The savanna was home to saber-toothed cats, hyenas, and giant birds. To survive, they not only had to avoid predators, but also find food in conditions of growing competition. Other hominins lived nearby: Australopithecines, Paranthropus, and possibly Homo rudolfensis. Homo habilis lived in an era where the coexistence of species was the norm. It was not dominant, but it showed the first signs of a transition to the human type of survival. The appearance of Homo habilis combined traits of primates and early humans. Its height was about 1.2 meters, approximately 4 feet, and its weight ranged from about 32 to 37 kilograms, 60 to 82 pounds. The body was light and elongated, with long arms and relatively short legs. This body type indicates that it had only recently transitioned to a terrestrial lifestyle and still retained some adaptations for climbing trees. One of the main differences between Homo habilis and its predecessors was an enlarged brain. Cranial capacity ranged from 600 to 700 cubic centimeters. This was significantly larger than that of Australopithecines, but smaller than that of later Homo species. The skull was low and elongated, with sloping foreheads and pronounced brow ridges. Cranial bones remained thick, and facial features were robust. The hands of Homo habilis were structured to confidently grip and use stone tools. The thumb was already opposable, and the hand was close in shape to that of modern humans. At the same time, the structure of the fingers and the shoulder girdle indicates that it could still climb well. The foot was closer to human, with a distinct longitudinal arch and shortened toes, suggesting regular bipedal locomotion. It is impossible to determine the exact skin color, hair coverage, or vocal characteristics. However, based on the structure of the larynx, it is assumed that Homo habilis did not possess fully developed speech. Its appearance would not have looked human by modern standards, yet it was already markedly different from its ape-like ancestors. The name Homo habilis translates from Latin as skillful man. It was proposed in 1960 by archaeologists Louis and Mary Leakey. The reason was that simple stone tools, deliberately created rather than accidentally formed, were first discovered alongside its remains. This distinguished it from earlier hominids, for whom no evidence of tool-making had been found. The stone tools associated with Homo habilis belong to the so-called Olduvai culture. These tools included sharp flakes, choppers, crude hand axes, and scrapers. Most of them were produced by striking flakes off a coarse stone to create sharp edges. Such tools allowed cutting flesh, breaking bones to extract marrow, and processing roots and tubers. Even the creation of the simplest tools requires a certain level of motor control, an understanding of shape and purpose. This indicates that Homo habilis possessed basic cognitive abilities, the ability to plan actions, adapt tools to tasks, and possibly transmit knowledge through imitation. However, there is no evidence at this stage that the technology was stable or improved over time. It is also worth noting that some researchers question whether Homo habilis was the sole maker of these tools. Remains of other species, such as Homo rudolfensis or late Australopithecines, have sometimes been found in the same layers. Nevertheless, Homo habilis is traditionally considered the first species for which we can confidently assert the intentional use of stone tools. The lifestyle of Homo habilis was entirely dependent on the natural environment in which it existed. This species did not build permanent shelters and did not master fire, so it inhabited areas near natural refuges, rocks, crevices, trees, or abandoned dens of other animals. Food remains and tools are often found in open areas, indicating temporary camps rather than permanent settlements. Its diet consisted mainly of gathered plant resources and animal matter. Homo habilis was not an active hunter of large game, but could catch small animals, insects, eggs, and also make use of meat from carcasses. Stone tools were used for cutting up carcasses, breaking bones, and processing plants. Cut marks on animal bones confirm this behavior. Its feeding strategy combined foraging and scavenging. This combination increased its chances of survival in a highly competitive environment. Homo habilis lived in habitats dominated by large and dangerous predators. In the open savanna and near water sources, it was threatened by saber-toothed cats, hyenas, leopards, and crocodiles. The existence of Homo habilis coincided with the peak of species such as Dinophilis, Meganterion, and early hyenas. These predators hunted in packs or ambushed prey, and Homo habilis had neither fangs nor claws nor the physical strength to defend itself. It was vulnerable both day and night. Defensive behavior based on strength was absent. Its main strategy was avoidance, using natural cover, moving quickly, and choosing activity times based on danger. Similar behavioral traits are seen in modern baboons and chimpanzees living in comparable environments. Possibly, Homo habilis groups posted lookouts or stayed closer to areas with fewer predators. There is speculation that Homo habilis might have used existing dens, abandoning them at the first sign of danger. It could also scavenge carcasses left behind by predators after they had fed. This was risky behavior. Approaching a carcass or crossing the territory of a large predator could end in death. Nevertheless, obtaining bone marrow and scraps of meat justified the risk in terms of survival. It moved primarily on two legs, which allowed it to conserve energy during long treks and freed its hands for carrying food or primitive tools. Resource search required constant movement. Skeletal fragments show evidence of injuries and signs of tooth wear, likely due to coarse food. Its social structure remains unknown. There is no evidence of burials or ritual behavior. However, the shared use of camps and tools, as well as food remains, suggests basic group organization. This may have been a small group united for protection and cooperative feeding. The question of whether Homo habilis possessed true intelligence remains open. In terms of brain size, it surpassed Australopithecines, but lagged far behind later Homo species. Its cranial capacity ranged from 600 to 700 cubic centimeters, about half that of modern humans. However, this volume was sufficient to support elementary information processing, memory of actions, and basic decision-making. The production of tools, documented in the Olduvai culture, indicates the presence of basic goals and sequences of actions. Creating a cutting edge by striking flakes off a core required an understanding of shape and outcome. These skills were likely transmitted from one generation to the next through imitation. Visual learning is observed in many primates, but in Homo habilis, it may have been more consistent. It is too early to speak of developed speech. The anatomy of the skull, lower jaw, and throat does not suggest the presence of a fully formed speech function. Most likely, it produced simple sounds, calls, gestures, and facial expressions, used for alarm signals, intragroup contact, and conveying basic states. This was not true language, but it is considered a precursor to linguistic communication. Judging by the findings, Homo habilis left no evidence of abstract thinking. There are no symbolic objects, burials, images, or items without direct utilitarian purpose. Everything discovered serves a practical function. This indicates that its behavior was primarily determined by instincts, survival needs, and simple forms of adaptation. The presence of nascent consciousness can only be speculated, based on contextual evidence. Homo habilis existed for approximately 1.1 million years, longer than many other species of the genus Homo. It disappeared from Africa about 1.4 million years ago, long before the appearance of modern humans and before the migrations of other Homo species beyond the continent. This process was not abrupt. Extinction occurred gradually, against a backdrop of climate fluctuations, increased competition, and the emergence of more adaptable hominids. During the existence of Homo habilis, Africa's climate continued to oscillate. Periods of drought alternated with wetter cycles, vegetation shifted, and fauna redistributed. These conditions demanded greater flexibility in survival strategies. Despite its adaptations, Homo habilis remained dependent on a limited set of practices: gathering, scavenging, and using the simplest tools. It had no consistent control over its environment, did not build shelters, did not use fire, and did not develop complex technologies. This period coincides with the appearance of Homo erectus. This species had a larger brain, more advanced body structure, more sophisticated tools, and likely the beginnings of social organization. Homo erectus could hunt, use fire, migrate, and explore new territories. In direct competition for food, shelter, and space, Homo habilis was less effective. Moreover, an increased population density of hominids in certain regions could have amplified pressure from both predators and other Homo groups. Homo habilis lacked both physical advantages and new behavioral strategies to compete in a changing ecosystem. As a result, it was either displaced or disappeared as a distinct species through replacement. There is no evidence of mass death or a sudden catastrophe. Its extinction is considered the result of accumulated factors, the most crucial being the emergence of a more adaptable competitor. The period of Homo habilis, from about 2.5 to 1.4 million years ago, coincided with the active evolution of several other hominids. It was not the only member of the Homo genus, and lived among species with which it may have competed for resources or coexisted within the same ecosystem. Australopithecus, including late forms like Australopithecus sediba, had not yet completely disappeared. These primates were more primitive, with smaller brains, a partially arboreal lifestyle, and limited behavioral skills. However, in some regions, they might have occupied the same ecological niche as Homo habilis. At the same time, the genus Paranthropus, especially Paranthropus boisei, still existed. These were robust hominins with massive jaws adapted for chewing tough plant foods. Their brains were smaller, but anatomically, they evolved along a separate path. Paranthropus did not use tools and is considered an evolutionary dead end. There may also have been coexistence with Homo rudolfensis, a debated species that some researchers separate from Homo habilis. It differed by having a larger skull and facial bones. Evidence suggests these two species could have inhabited the same regions of East Africa, occupying similar ecological niches. By the end of Homo habilis' era, early Homo erectus appeared. This species quickly demonstrated technological and anatomical advantages. Its spread coincides with the disappearance of Homo habilis, suggesting direct competition or replacement. Homo habilis was not the dominant species. It lived among multiple hominin lineages, some of which vanished while others continued to evolve. Its era was not an isolated stage, but part of a complex and dynamic phase of early human history. Homo habilis lived in an age when multiple hominin species might have existed simultaneously in overlapping territories. They shared food sources, water, and shelter. Their ranges intersected, which likely led to competition for resources. At the same time, no direct evidence of violent interaction between species has yet been found. Strategies likely differed. Some specialized in scavenging, others in plant foods, others in active hunting. Perhaps this resource, partitioning, allowed them to coexist for thousands of years. But in the long run, only one evolutionary path survived, the one leading to modern humans. All parallel lineages disappeared, and Homo habilis, despite its role in evolution, turned out to be a branch that left no direct descendants. Homo habilis was not human in the full sense of the word. It lacked developed consciousness, did not possess speech, did not control fire, and created nothing beyond what was utilitarian. Yet it marks the beginning of the lineage that leads to Homo sapiens. It was a transitional species between a primitive primate and a sentient being. It did not build civilization, leave behind symbols, or show signs of thinking beyond survival. But it was the first to consciously use tools. It walked on two legs, made choices, learned, and passed on behavioral patterns. Homo habilis became the first to act not solely by instinct. It did not outlast its competitors. It did not take a dominant position and left no direct descendants. Yet it set the course. Its existence made possible everything that followed, from Homo erectus to modern humans. Homo habilis is not merely an extinct species. It is a starting point. The evolutionary chain begins here, and we are only one of its links.